It's only entertainment.
Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today we've got Chris Jones. He's with Cannabis Express, the founder of Cannabis Express. We're going to talk about everything that is the Canadian marketplace, retail, behavioral changes, and all of that. But I want to introduce Chris. So thanks for being with the Talking Hedge. Chris, how are you?
Hey Josh, thanks for having me. Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. Just relaxing after 420. Quite the week, quite the year. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got in the industry, what is Cannabis Express, all that good stuff.
Great. So I'll go back a couple of years. So while I was doing my MBA, I was looking for a job. And at the time, around 2018, 2017, there wasn't a lot of cannabis opportunities aside from, large cultivation companies. So then I found a company called Origin House. So it was publicly traded, offices in Toronto, and they were looking for someone to join the team. So I joined there. I was there for close to 2 years. And while I was there, we bought 5 companies, mostly in the US. So I was traveling back and forth from Canada to the US, looking at different companies in California to buy, ranging from cultivation to distribution, manufacturing. And then from that, we acquired a retail company, vape retail company in Canada and Ontario, the largest vape retailer at the time, called 180 Smoke. And the plan with that acquisition was to convert as many of the retail vape stores into cannabis stores. Then I went on to, we ended up doing a deal with one of the first round lottery winners in Ontario. So Ontario, originally they were gonna have an open market system, then they changed it to government run stores, then they changed it to a lottery based system where there, you'd pay a little bit of money, you'd enter in your name, some information, and then you'd wait a month and then they would announce the winners of the lottery on who could actually get the license to open up the store. So we did a deal with one of the first round winners, and then from that, made a lot of relationships with the licensing body, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. And I saw a lot of opportunity in opening up cannabis retail stores. Then our company, the one I worked for at the time, was acquired by a much larger US multi-state operator called Cresco Labs. So when that deal was announced, it was the largest US M&A transaction at the time. So it was about 1.1 billion, the total deal size. So from that, obviously companies while you're being bought yourself. So a lot of the deal flow gets put on hold while you're going through the buying and integration process. So then I saw an opportunity to start opening up retail stores in Ontario, because the government, from having a first lottery, then a second lottery, they changed it to a first come first served process. So when that was announced, I decided that I thought it would be a good idea to start a new company and apply for some of these licenses. So I applied for the license at the beginning when it first opened up, the first day, and applied for that. Then I had a couple months before the second license application went in. So basically in Ontario, how it works is there's 2 different licenses you need. So the first license is called the retail operator license. So that one was the first license that opened up for anyone to apply to. Is basically a license that gives you the ability to open up to 75 stores in Ontario. Then we had about a 3-month window before the second license application opened up, which is called the Retail Store Authorization License. And that is the site-specific license. So basically, if you have a corporation, you need the ROL, the first license. And then for each individual location that you want to open, you need to apply for an RSA, the Retail Store Authorization. So during that time, I raised close to $1 million from a public company and a group of private shareholders. So I raised $1 million, opened up 4 of the first approximately 100 retail stores in Ontario. Our run rate at the time was close to 15 million. Hired about 30 people, and this is all from home during COVID. Which is pretty crazy. So I decided our part of the strategy was to avoid opening up stores in Toronto, just because of how competitive I thought it would be, and because of mostly competition and the fact that a lot of the landlords think that, you're opening up a cannabis store, you must have a lot of money. We're going to charge you, double the market rate. So I avoided Toronto for those two reasons, and opened up, the second store. So the second store in Barrie, the first store in a town called Innisville, the first store in a town called Bradford, and then another store in Barrie. So I opened up the four, and then my partners at the time made me an offer to buy me out. So I sold my ownership back to the company and group of private investors that originally made the million dollar investment in the business. So I sold that back to them a couple months ago in September. And as soon as that was done, I decided to, do it all again, but, much better. Just because from, looking at the industry, I saw that a lot of customers who shop at these stores, at least right now in Canada, are, they're going in and they're not really mentioning specific brands that they want. Most of the questions that customers have when walking into a store, when they were allowed to walk into a store at the time, so obviously stores are closed now and only allow curbside pickup. But they'd come in, they'd say, hey, I need help sleeping. What's the highest THC percentage flower you have? I don't want to get too high with something that's high in CBD. I want to buy a chocolate. I want a gummy, questions like that. So from, hearing all those questions and really learning about what customers want and, how they actually, walk through the store, what they look at, what they touch, what they do, I thought that it would make a lot more sense to go the opposite direction of a lot of, the retailers that I see opening up stores in Canada and Ontario. A lot of the stores I see are large format, 2,000 to 5,000 square feet. They have, 400 to 1,000 different SKUs or products. And they have 10, 20, 30 people working at the store. So I want to go the complete opposite direction, which brings me to the new business that I started, in September, which is called Cannabis Express. The idea behind this business is to open up a chain of tiny stores across Ontario. The first store actually opened up last week in Brampton, Ontario. The store is 353 square feet in size, and the retail square footage, so the actual retail space for customers, is 80 square feet. So this store, I believe, is the smallest licensed cannabis store in the country. And this store in particular, and as well as our other stores, we're going to be stocking 50 to 60 cannabis SKUs. So keeping the assortment limited. All the products will be on two different menu boards. You'll come in and you'll see everything in front of you. You don't need to speak to someone, the salesperson, for 10, 20 minutes. You can if you want to, but the purpose of everything is, speed and efficiency. So customers come in, they pick what they want. We stock new products every week. So, it's not going to be the same stuff every time you come in, and, getting customers in and out as fast as possible. And since the stores are so small and we're able to, staff less people, the cost of these products will be a lot lower. So how the system works in Ontario is the AGCO, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, they're the licensing body. So they're the ones that make sure your store is compliant and they grant you the license. Then once you have that license, you take it to the Ontario Cannabis Store, which is the provincial distributor. So the government in Ontario is the distributor of cannabis. So you go to them, you say, hey, here's my license. You go through an onboarding process, and then every week you have access to their online portal where you can see what products are in stock, and then you put in your order. So it's interesting in Ontario because it sort of favors having a fewer number of stores versus some of the larger companies. So if you think about traditional retail, you'll have companies like, for example, Walmart. They have a lot of stores, they purchase a lot of products, same with, a Costco, where they get volume discounts because of how much product they order. So for cannabis in Ontario, it's completely the opposite. If you have one store or 100 stores, you're paying the exact same price for product. So you don't get volume discounts depending on, how many stores you have or how much product you're ordering. So that system, favors companies that have, less than 5 stores. But then obviously when you have, a lot more stores, it's, not the best. But being able to, keep costs as low as we are, we're able to then pass that, those savings on to the customer. So we can actually, charge less for the exact same products that you would go into, a store that, is worth $1 million. that the people spent on it and, buy those same products for less. So right now, we have the first store in Brampton that just opened up a week ago. And then we have our next store opens up in a town called Uxbridge this summer. And then we have 2 other stores in Wasaga Beach and Hillsdale also opening up this summer. So we'll have four stores open by the end of the summer. And then the plan is to get 10 stores open by the end of the year. So right now I'm very focused on opening up these stores, keeping costs down as low as possible, and then passing those savings on to customers when we do open up.
Mm-hmm. That's great. There's quite a few different opportunities up in Washington State, where I'm located at, where we have, like you mentioned, 2,000 SKUs on the wall, and it's daunting. So for people to go in there and try to figure out what they want is crazy. Versus, shoot, I want to show you this. The smallest dispensary that we have in Washington State is a couple hundred feet. So looking at this log cabin, I was just here at this dispensary here in the middle of nowhere, and what I noticed is there was 2 older women that were in the store, and then I was charging my car. There's actually a charging station right here too. And while I was there for an hour, there was only 2 other people, both of them also older women, looking at cannabis products. So there's an opportunity to have a small store in the middle of nowhere and still make money. This is literally me on one side of the building and the bud tender on the other side of the building, taking a selfie. So very, very small store, but if you know what products are supposed to be selling, you don't really need those large stores that are daunting with 2,000 SKUs. So there's room for everybody to be involved. So it's interesting to hear your take on it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I don't think obviously there's, I was saying customers right now, there are certain customers who want to go into a much larger store and browse through 1,000 products and, really be taken on a tour. But I think for the most part, most customers right now, especially the ones that are converting over from the illicit market, they don't really want to go into, this huge store. They want to go in, buy what they want and leave. And then even looking at now with, COVID and the lockdowns and people not even being allowed in these retail stores, it doesn't make sense at all for people to be building these gigantic stores and then, the customer can't come inside. So some of the locations I'm looking at right now will just be pickup only. So customers can show up outside, go on our website, put in their order, and then just pick it up and leave.
Mm-hmm. Take a closer look at some of those trends up in Canada. This is a couple of reports I wanted to bring up from Headset, looking at some of the Canadian sales trends. So looking at the data for sales, it looks like there's about $250 million in total sales with an average daily sales of around 8 million. And that's fourth quarter of last year. So not too shabby, not too bad up there. I think California is basically dominating more than what you guys are doing, but there's not as many people, obviously. So I wanted to take a look at the sales data, but also what's happening with the post-lockdown. So the lockdown impacts, you can see some of the stores, I think, closed. You had mentioned some of the fiasco with the government stores in Ontario. And so maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what you were seeing with the lockdown and the impacts that we had with the pandemic last year.
Yeah, it's been challenging because there are obviously stores that, the lockdown happened and the sales pick up a lot more because people have more cash to spend. So, if you're home all day and you're not spending money on going out and other things like that, you have more disposable income to spend on, cannabis, alcohol, subscriptions, whatever. So people are definitely spending, at least at the beginning of the lockdown, more money on cannabis. But then looking at, from a retailer's point of view, I've seen that at least now for the past couple months, retail sales have dropped between 40 to 50% since people aren't allowed to actually come into the stores. And this has been challenging because, not only because sales are dropping, but also the category mix of products people are buying is also very different. So for a retailer, usually the highest product that you're going to sell in your store is going to be cannabis accessories. So like bongs, rolling papers, vape hardware, things like that. And then now, since people aren't even allowed to come into stores, that amount of accessories that people are buying dropped, on average from about 5% to less than 1%. So people aren't really coming into stores buying not coming into stores, but people aren't really going online and, buying a bong curbside pickup. So that's also been pretty detrimental to retailers, that the highest margin products are, not moving anymore. But then, yeah, your point about California, obviously it's a tricky comparison comparing California to Canada, because they've had such a robust medical system in place for such a long time, and then when they switched over to recreational legislation, it was a lot easier for them to change all of the medical clinics into rec ones. So yeah, and the population obviously is, I believe it's a bit larger in California than it is in Canada. So yeah, their system is a lot different. And obviously brands can, they can advertise, you can have billboard signs, things like that. You can give products away for free. And then in Canada, depending on what province you're in, it's a lot more challenging and restrictive for, companies and brands to advertise and really get customers to buy their products.
Right. Well, they've also had a 50-year history of a really strong cannabis culture. Not that Vancouver hasn't, but Haight-Ashbury is world famous for that, the centralization of cannabis culture and community kind of starting from there. But I want to shift gears a little bit towards consumer preference and behavioral changes and what we've seen as a result of the pandemic. We could start with California as an example, with $65 minimum order on purchasing. So online, like you mentioned, it's all curbside, or at least it was. California required a delivery, and so you couldn't even go into the store. So $65 minimums on delivery was nice because it forced you to spend $65. However, you're missing out on going into the store and seeing things you might not otherwise have. I'll break that down to like just grocery shopping. When I do online grocery shopping, I'm missing out on buying random stuff like sun-dried tomatoes,
chocolate bars, magazines, all those impulse buying items you don't really buy when you're online shopping, right? Well, for the most part, at least, in terms of groceries.
Right, exactly. So for those of us that do use cannabis frequently, yourself and other folks up in Canada, looking at percentage of using cannabis by generation from Gen Z all the way to the silent generation, 31% of cannabis consumers using cannabis more frequently as a result of the pandemic. I would expect that to be a lot higher, just as what we saw last year with the increase in edibles, with a decrease in topicals and tinctures, maybe a shift towards bulk instead of buying grams or buying ounces. I would have thought that in Canada, that number would be a lot higher, but how much did the illicit market increase maybe is another question.
Yeah, exactly. Even one interesting statistic I saw recently was the average age of the cannabis consumer. Before it was much lower, and now it's going up to like mid to late 30s. So it's interesting to see that there's a lot more older customers, being interested in cannabis and trying it out for the first time. And, the products that they buy, like a lot of them I've seen come into the store and they're not, like, for example, like my parents wouldn't come into a store and, buy flower to roll up and smoke, but they would be interested in coming in and buying like a topical or a tincture, those types of product categories. So it's interesting to see, an older demographic who grew up in a time where, cannabis was not legal, and now they're, getting interested in it again as well.
Right. So this report from the Brightfield Group is saying that although 31% of Canadians are using it more frequently, more than 2/3 are saying that it helped them deal with stress during the pandemic. So obviously something that they're using, whether it's by income or, like you mentioned, not demographics, but age. Everyone's using it, regardless of how much money they're making or how old they are. People are tending to use it more frequently as it's becoming more readily available. 2.0 has been out for over a year as people are switching from flower to concentrates, edibles, everything else, and usage rates are definitely going up by generation. So to your point, Gen Z is going up 41%, all the way to the silent generation, increasing their use 10%. you just can't really get away from it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So cannabis consumers are using 5 or more days a week, most likely to increase their usage amid the pandemic. So I think it's whether it's cannabis or chocolate or even alcohol, people are definitely going towards vices during times of added stress. Um, but it looks like edibles, there was a 23% increase in that, but fewer were using inhalables, probably because of some of that fear that was surrounding the vape crisis that kind of was around the same time. People were afraid to use combustibles, pre-rolls, inhalables, going more towards edibles, kind of causing that behavioral change. People looking for safer products, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Even my own consumption, I've definitely seen it, shift since the pandemic has started. Even just, speaking to customers in store and, friends and others who are cannabis consumers, definitely their consumption has gone up since the start of all this.
Now, would you say that that's across the board from flower to edibles, or is it specific? For me, I smoked a lot of flower to the point where I had to kind of cut back. I did sober October because I blew through a pound in just a matter of, a month and a half or something silly. So I really had to kind of step back and use sober October as an excuse to reset my tolerance.
Oh wow, yeah, no, I think across the board, consumption's up on all product categories, but then going back to Canada and Ontario, there's some product categories that, aren't as developed as others. Like, for example, if you look at concentrates, the selection of concentrates that are in stores isn't the best right now. So those products are going over to the illicit market, which is unfortunate. And then, categories like flower, pre-rolls, vape pens. The product assortment that we have right now in Ontario is very strong for those categories, but it's only a matter of time before more products come in, it gets more competitive, prices go down, and then customers start switching over. Because I genuinely believe that everyone would rather purchase something from a licensed retailer that they know is tested versus getting it from some guy in a just meeting him in a park or down the street, right? So it's only a matter of time, and it's similar to California and other places, right? It's it'll just take time before people slowly convert over.
Yeah, we all know a guy, right? We all know somebody who grows. And so it's easy to find a trusted dealer, where I'm getting my pounds for $500. It's hard to go and pay $200 for an ounce at a retail store. So there needs to be a happy medium. Having said that, I don't buy liquor out of, the back of somebody's truck. I don't know anybody who buys cigarettes out of, the boot of a car. So at some point, you're going to go online and look for the best deals. You're not going to go and just buy some illicit product eventually, but that price definitely has to come down to reality where you're not spending several $100s on cannabis. You're going to have to compare that to what a pound of tobacco is, which is around $20 for a pound of tobacco. We need to get maximum, I would say $50 for a pound of cannabis in order to really put a dent in the illicit market. So, I mean, hopefully that'll come eventually, but it's going to take some time, I think. And the U.S. needs to come on board with federal legalization for that to really be implemented across the board. With a small shop like you're planning on implementing, how important is it to offer not only online service and delivery, but incentives? Is it important to give daily deals online to trigger purchases, or is it just a matter of offering, a brand or the product? What is it? Is it a matter of deals, or is it just
Oh, it's definitely both. So right now we're opting to not do delivery just because the cost of it doesn't really make a lot of sense for us. But in terms of doing deals, it really is, especially in Canada, province specific, because due to the legislation, the legal framework, it is challenging for for brands and for retailers to actually give deals to customers. So you're not actually allowed to have messaging that will incentivize a purchase. So if you So I know there's some retailers I've seen that have like, buy an ounce, get a pre-roll for $1. Deals like that are obviously great for customers, but you're not actually technically allowed to do them. But then it's challenging because if you go online, you see some of these illegal websites where you get loyalty points, you get free edibles, you get a lot of bonus product for making purchases through them. So yeah, it definitely is challenging, competing against the illicit market when they're able to do a lot of those things that licensed retailers aren't allowed to do. But I think it's just a matter of time before regulations change and things start to open up before we're able to start doing some of those things, because that's the real reason why a lot of people haven't converted over, is because we're not allowed to do those things.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that the deals are for the everyday person. I think what we've seen here in the States, or at least in Washington State and the West Coast, is that deals are actually for people that wouldn't otherwise come to the store. So your people who are coming there no matter what are already going there. The deals are really going to try to draw people from maybe other shops. So yeah, interesting nonetheless. You're going to have to obviously apply some discounts in order to get people and grow your market share. Speaking of market growth, looks like cannabis in 2020, last year market grew 118% despite the pandemic. So another Brightfield report here showing that growth being driven by an increased retail openings. So this isn't really based on same store sales, but just finally getting some stores to open up. I know Vancouver was really slow to that. Can you speak on why Vancouver and Ontario were so slow to roll out? And I'm curious if Hell's Angels has anything to do with Vancouver's slowness and rollout. Do they have a grip on the industry, or is that just fiction?
Vancouver's an interesting place because I think a lot of the illegal cannabis that's grown in Canada does come from BC, from Vancouver. So I think the illicit, illegal growth of product and availability is pretty big in Vancouver. So that's number one why a lot of retail stores haven't opened up and the market hasn't grown as fast as most people would think. And then I think the second reason is the way they set up their licensing procedure. So it's pretty different over there from Ontario. So I believe in Vancouver and BC, the town or municipality also is able to weigh in on the decision of if a cannabis store can open up or not. So if you're not, close with, or, if the town isn't really cannabis friendly, then, it's going to be very challenging for you to open up a store out there. And from a business point of view, the risk is a lot higher that, you start building a store, you get a lease, and then you go through this licensing process. Then near the end, the town says, you know what, we don't want a cannabis store there, or, we think there's too many, so you're not going to get a license. So that's pretty prohibitive for businesses to try and open up over there. And then when it comes to Ontario, I think part of the challenge was, the distribution system. So the government is in charge of distribution over here. So it's kind of you're going back and forth between one body that gives you the license, but then you need the other body to, have their distribution facility working in order to actually get the product. So, if you actually look at a place like Saskatchewan, so in Saskatchewan, another province in Ontario, in Canada, retailers are able to actually buy directly from the licensed producer. So over there, it's much more beneficial and much easier for a store to open up and get licensed, as well as get volume discounts. So if you have 10 stores and you're buying from one producer, you can get a much larger discount than, in a place like Ontario, where, if you have one store or 100 stores, you're still paying the same price. And then going back to Ontario again, in terms of licensing, we did have the two lottery processes. So, there's a lottery for 25 stores that opened, and another lottery for 50 stores, and then they opened it up after that to the first come, first serve process. So they are rolling out now. They increased the number of licenses they're issuing about 2 months ago. So they're issuing about 30 licenses per week right now. So I think in the next year, we're probably going to be at well over 1,000 stores that are licensed. I believe right now there's a little over 600 stores that are licensed. And then of the 600, there's probably, I'd say about 70 to 80% are actually open. And then there's probably like 100 that are, in either, not going to open or still in the process of opening up. They just have their license but haven't actually opened. So the ramp up is pretty significant in Ontario. And then obviously due to COVID, people who wanted to open up 10 stores are probably now thinking about they're only going to, open up 5 stores just because of, I think their revenue forecasts were a lot higher pre-COVID than obviously now.
Yeah. So we left off, we were just talking about you thinking that there was going to be a reduction in the number of store counts because of the anticipation of higher revenues from stores is probably also coupled in with excessive costs of goods and an increase in capital expenses that maybe weren't thought of initially. But I'm wondering where you think that might turn with potential mergers and acquisitions. I've been saying on the podcast for a while that there's going to be a lot of consolidation and or capitulation for companies that don't want to but have to. We've already seen Tilray and Afria, Hexo acquired Zenabis, Fire and Flower acquired the Friendly Stranger chain of retail stores, and Flyer acquired Terrace Global. I'm assuming that's just the beginning of it, especially if U.S. federal legalization happens and we're already growing for $1.30. Canada seems to be growing around $6. There's going to have to be some changes and or mergers. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think we've seen a lot of large deals happen lately, and then looking at retail closely, like there's a lot of, especially in Ontario, there's a lot of like mom and pop type of cannabis retailers that own like 1 to 2 stores. And it's kind of tricky because going through the sale process already myself, the AGCO, Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, they need to approve all of these transactions. So the timeline can end up being over a year for some of these transactions to be approved. And the legal fees, in time you have to wait ends up really weighing on some of these deals. So for a lot of the retailers who, have 1 to 2 stores who think that they're going to end up selling them, I think it's probably unlikely unless you have a lot more stores. Like I think there's going to be a lot more deals for retailers that have, I'd say between like 4 or 5 to 10 stores or greater. But like if you have 1 to 2 stores, the amount of like legal costs and time and energy put into, buying 2 stores, changing the name, rebranding, it ends up not even really being worth it unless those stores are, doing really, really well, which is, the number of them that are doing really well, like a single store operator, is probably very low. So I think there is going to be a lot of consolidation, but like the people who have 1 to 2 stores, I don't really think it's gonna, I don't really think they're going to get a lot of offers to end up buying them up.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of excessive stories out there right now. MedMen, for example, their market cap was ridiculously high, so that had to come back down to reality. But within a lot of these stores, we're kind of seeing maybe the rise of value brands. So, I kind of have said, which I don't know, it seemed controversial, I guess, that brands didn't matter. People were going in asking what the highest THC was when they're going into any of these stores and then finding out what fits their price point. Now, I think post Vape Gate and everything else, now that the stores have been open in existing markets, people are finding out what brands they like at what price points. Are you seeing through Cannabis Express, up in the Ontario area, that people are looking for value brands, or are they still going towards the first product they touched? What's kind of the consumption preference up there?
Yeah, I think you're correct in terms of people, especially in Canada or in Ontario right now, not really, connecting with a lot of the brands. Like people go into the store right now, and I spend a lot of time in different stores, and customers come in and generally they say, hey, what's your highest THC percentage flower? What's new? What's high in CBD? I have trouble sleeping at night? Do you have something for sleep, or have trouble focusing, like something for focus? So people are more shopping along those, they're using that as more of a guiding principle for their shopping versus, asking for a certain brand. Like sometimes people come in if they have like a certain vape device where you buy pods, they'll say, hey, like give me PAX pods or things like that. But if you don't have a specific piece of hardware, like people just come in and tell you how they're feeling, and they shop that way. Or hey, what's the cheapest thing you guys have, versus coming in saying, oh, I want that whatever X brand product. So I think you're right in that sense. In terms of like value products, the majority of flower being sold right now, especially in Ontario, is like a value based product. So there's a lot of cheaper products, a lot more expensive products looking at the flower category. But yeah, the value brand, the cheaper offering is what's taking up most of the market share right now. But yeah, people aren't really connected to a lot of the brands in Ontario, especially in Canada, especially not yet at least.
Do you have a decent grip on what bud tenders are buying? Because they tend to have like a direct access to thousands of SKUs. And what I noticed on 420 when I go to 20 stores on 420 is that 95%, that is 19 out of 20 bud tenders said that their favorite product at the moment was flower. They also said 2/3 of the favorites of customers was flower. And I'm wondering, with your earlier comment about concentrate not having a high quality up there, is that the reason that bud tenders aren't really gravitating towards concentrate, or is it the fact that they're not paid as well to be able to afford that higher price point product?
I think it's a bunch of different factors. Like for example, in Canada and Ontario right now, there isn't a lot of selection for concentrates. So when we do our ordering each week, we get like a list of all the products that are in stock, and then we put in our order. So there's not a lot of concentrates available. And then obviously, like as a retailer myself, I look at what the bulk of products people are buying, and yeah, it still is flower, flower and pre-rolls and vape pens, and you go down to edibles, and then concentrates, topicals are near the bottom. So yeah, we obviously don't order a heavy amount of those, just because the bulk of sales is in the flower category still. But obviously looking at more mature markets, like over time, people are gravitating more towards non combustible products, so like vape pens and edibles, things like that. So I think it's more so obviously a matter of time before people end up smoking less. And then also when the product categories get more developed and the prices come down, some of those things are more affordable as well.
Mm-hmm. So you're taking a look at distribution trends up in Canada with like drinks, I guess. There was a big hype with the $4 billion investment of Constellation Brands up in Canada, and yet all we've seen is Aurora and Canopy write off the tune of $1 and $3 billion up there, and drinks are nowhere to be found. So is that an issue with distribution, or is it an issue with just trying to figure out a cost-effective way of infusing beverages?
Oh, I think it's a mix of things. Like if you look at, California and other places that have consumption lounges, I think drinks are, more suited to a place where you can, drink it socially. And then obviously in Canada, like those products were introduced later on, as part of like the 2.0 product offering, versus at the very beginning, it was just like flower and, pre-rolls that were sold in stores. So yeah, like I really like the beverages, but it still does account for a very small percentage of the market. And then as well, it's seasonal as well, right? Like in the summertime, a lot more people buy drinks than in the wintertime. And then also looking at what area the store is in. Like for example, I had some stores that were north of north of the major city where I'm at in Toronto, and drinks were selling really well there, versus one of my stores in a different city right now, drinks aren't selling as heavy. So it really depends on seasonality, as well as the customers around that store. But yeah, drinks definitely didn't take off as well as a lot of people thought they would.
Unless it's coffee, and then it's all year round, whether it's cold brew, iced coffee. But you know what's funny is we don't have coffee up here in Washington. It's too expensive. You go to Portland and it's available in small batch
Like
sizes.
infused coffee?
Yeah, grab and go. I'm not talking about K cup because if you're a coffee snob, that's not real coffee. I'm talking about like real coffee.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
so yeah, if you have a cold brew or anything like that available in Portland, but not here at the home of Starbucks, because again, it's just too expensive for an in-state manufacturing process. It's going to require going across state lines. The ability that you have up in Canada, albeit a smaller market, at least you're able to kind of grab the whole market, whereas here it's just too expensive to try and do that.
Oh
uh,
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So cannabis markets, let's look at some crystal ball predictions, take a look at headsets, total sales in the US and Canada, and see what will happen moving down the line. So from the US and Canada, looking at in terms of estimated annual sales volume, obviously, I mean, with the help of California, that pretty much skews everything. Fifth largest GDP in the world down there in Cali. Um, but Canada, not too bad. Looking at maybe like what is that, 5 billion maybe next year.
Yeah, so the market obviously, yeah, California is obviously the biggest marketplace in the world for cannabis. Yeah, Canada is, not that far off in terms of, I guess, comparing it to California when the populations are
Right.
pretty similar to each other.
Yeah, that is kind of funny that all of Canada is trying to catch up to California. But in terms of how much they're going to grow, Canada is going to account for about 32% of the estimated annual sales growth. Um, So sales growth, not how much they're going to actually grow. That'd be interesting if they were going to go 32% of all of the cannabis, but it looks like their sales growth. That's not too bad. If they can get some international exports, it seems like Canada is being a little bit on the protection side, not allowing imports from Colombia. I think that's going to stifle the market a little bit. So as soon as they can kind of open it up, allow for some more exports to Germany, assuming they can get some higher quality concentrate and flour or whatever else they're allowed to export to places like Israel and Germany, that could help out Canada substantially.
Yeah, it's just tricky, obviously, if we allowed importing from places like Colombia and Mexico, where their cost of growing is, significantly lower than here in Canada, it would really affect the domestic market. But in terms of exporting, um, I've seen there's some deals that are going on for places like Israel where companies in Canada are exporting cannabis for for research and other purposes. But yeah, I don't really think we're going to be a world leader in exporting cannabis. I see probably Canada more as an exporter of knowledge, growing practices, products, brands, things like that, versus actually exporting cannabis. Like there are probably better places in the world to to grow cannabis than in Canada.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You guys just had a big 420 up there. What did you see from Cannabis Express? Was it still majority flower? We kind of talked about that a little bit, but are you seeing more folks trying different stuff, even though the quality of maybe concentrate isn't where it should be, or is flower still dominating 420 sales?
Yeah, 420 was a big day. It was still dominated, I guess, at least in my stores, in flower, but average basket size went up. People bought more products. It was our biggest sales day so far on 420, so it's always a good sales day. But then we're still restricted here in Ontario in regards to customers not being allowed to come into the store, which is unfortunate. So sales like for products like accessories are down way lower than what they usually are if customers are allowed in store. Like no one's curbside going curbside pickup to buy like a bong or like a dab rig. Those are usually products that people need to buy in store and talk to the
Right.
people who work in the store to learn about them. But yeah, it's still a big sales day for 420, but yeah, mostly dominated by flower as well.
What if somebody doesn't go online and pre-order? What's the options? Because with Arizona right now, they have the same issue. You can't go in the store, but they don't have anything online. So you're literally like looking at a black and white menu with no pictures, and you can't look at it before you buy it. So if you were to buy a vape cart, for example, which is $80 down there because it's just opened up as a rec market, so incredibly expensive. Then they put in a child-proof bag, so you're not even ensured that they put everything you bought that's in there, which happens a lot. People forget to put stuff in. And then you get home, whatever, you open it up and you look and your vape cart is brown or just something nasty.
Oh, that's the worst.
Exactly. So anything like that up there?
I think obviously the odds of, mispacking an item for a customer is greater when, you just hand someone a bag and then they leave, which is, obviously unfortunate as a customer. You get home and it's, it's the wrong item, or it's, spoiled or whatnot. And obviously as a retailer, if you have employees giving out, the wrong items or extra items, and it's not good for the business. So yeah, those things are all obviously not good when it's curbside pickup only, but at least it's, obviously a little bit better than how you mentioned in Arizona, where you're just looking at this, menu with no pictures. In Ontario, you can, people can buy online through the website, or they can just show up at the door. They pull out their phone, they put in the order, and then they can, call in and talk to someone, ask them a couple questions if they need to. But it's still, yeah, the interaction is, very, very different. It's, tough on retailers as well, because you can't really upsell a product when it's curbside pickup. Like you're, it's the same thing. Like if you, order groceries online, like you're not really buying a lot of those impulse items. You're really just buying the essentials, what you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes all the world of difference if you can actually see it online and know what it looks like. I can't imagine just buying something in Arizona off a black and white, menu and not even knowing beforehand.
Yeah, unless you've already tried it before and it's something brand or product that know and trust. But a lot of the customers are like first time purchasers, right? Or they're buying an item that they never bought before. So definitely tough for them.
Mm-hmm. What did you see as a companion to flower? You said flower is still majority purchase on 420. Did you see any random, or not random, but what was like the number one companion to flower?
Yeah, just flower pre-rolls. People are buying wide assortment of pre-rolls, so like single pre-rolls. Those were big, and then edibles come next, and then going down concentrates. But yeah, topicals, no one's really buying topicals as well. That's another tough product for curbside pickup. Like a lot of people aren't buying that curbside pickup only as well, because it's another product that's usually priced, fairly high, especially in Ontario. Like a small jar can run you between like 40 to like 80, 90, $100 Canadian. So that's an expensive item that drops in sales as well for when it's curbside only, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it's flower, then pre-rolls, vapes, and then edibles.
On a 420, when I went to one of the 20 stores, I was in a blue collar area in South Seattle called Tacoma, and a trucker community. So one of the stores said that their number one product was topicals. I was really surprised by that, but I guess maybe kind of makes sense in that neighborhood. I still think they're doing it wrong though.
That's
Topicals
interesting.
should not be your number one if you're selling cannabis and flower. I just think
Okay, it sounds kind of strange. I guess it depends on who their customers are. Maybe they're just stocking a lot of topicals, but I've never heard that before, that a store number one seller is
no.
topicals. It's interesting.
No, I've been doing that for 5 years, and that was the first time. And so my immediate response is, you guys are doing it wrong. But it looks like category share in Canada, like you said, 55% is flower, and then 1 out of 5 approximately is a pre-roll, which is interesting. And then behind that is vape pens at 13%. So yeah, y'all are not buying concentrate up there at all. So it must be some brown poop soup up there.
Yeah, it's just that's just the last product category to really get developed. So yeah, it'll take time, but that category will go up. I see Canada probably being pretty aligned with how California is right now in terms of product mix.
Yeah, but like you said, you gotta have value in there. You're not gonna buy nasty stuff at a really high price. So until you can get the quality to be somewhere that's acceptable, no one's gonna buy it. But once they figure that out, it's gonna go parabolic like a hockey stick, just like cryptocurrency. It's straight to the moon in terms of growth, sales growth.
Oh yeah, those product categories will have big growth, especially once consumption's permitted, which hopefully will happen in the next couple of years. beverages and things like that will increase as well.
Yeah. What else are you anticipating? Are you going to be expanding into your stores with Cannabis Express? Are you going to be trying to be vertically integrated with the producer processor? I mean, what are your plans for 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, so the plan for this year is to get up to 10 stores open. So I'm just focused on expanding, opening up stores, and then looking at different formats for stores. So one of the locations I have right now, the plan is to make it pickup only. So I'm looking at certain geographic areas that have a high concentration of stores, and then trying to open up a pickup only location in those areas. And then just, obviously the costs are a lot lower when you have, 1-2 people working at a pickup only spot. There's, the location's in good shape. You don't really have to put any money into building it out. You just need to, buy the, shelves and things like that you need inside the store, signage, things like that outside. So the plan for that is, if I'm able to undercut my competitors, because, my costs and, my operational costs are a lot lower than theirs. So pick a few pickup only locations I'm trying to get open, as part of the 10 store mix. And then also potentially looking at creating our own branded products. But so right now you'd have to, in Ontario and Canada, you'd have to get, you either get licensed yourself if you want to, make your own products. I don't want to be a grower. I don't want to be a, manufacturer. I'd rather just, hire a grower or a manufacturer to, create my own products. Yeah. So I think probably once we have at least 5 stores open, then I'll start exploring getting someone else to contract manufacture our own branded products. So I'll just look, see what's selling in the store. If, a certain, pre-roll or a certain strain or whatever is selling, really well, then I'll look at, okay, who produces this? How much can they, produce it for me for? And then I'll start, having my own branded products in store. But the minimum order quantities for a lot of those products is pretty high. So I doubt you'll see, one store operator selling their own products, unless it's like a grinder, like a lighter, zigzags, things like that. They can get branded, but for your own product, you really need, bunch of stores before it makes financial sense. So this year, the plan is just get as many stores open as possible, ideally 10, a mix of the curbside only pickup stores and like in-store shopping, and then look at introducing our own branded products from, certain categories like flower, pre-rolls that are doing well.
Is your strategy for reducing overhead expenses, can that include vending machines and or drone delivery?
Oh, here you can't do that. Yeah, no, I know in California, I was looking at that a while ago, vending machines, but yeah, you can't have any vending machines unless they're like, I think you could have it, but it would have to be in store. So the person would have to, have their ID checked, they'd get into the store, and then, you could potentially maybe have a vending machine, but it's kind of pointless. I think it's a waste of space to have that. And then obviously for delivery right now, we're only temporarily allowed to do delivery just because of all the lockdowns. So I think they'll probably, take delivery away eventually, and then have to update the rules, because it was something that was implemented fairly quickly just because of all the lockdowns. But yeah, drone delivery, that could be something hopefully potentially in the future, but obviously you still need to, verify ID and, and all that. But have you seen that anywhere else, drone delivery, or people working on it?
Not with Canada. Not for cannabis. No, I've seen some golf courses do like alcohol drone delivery on the golf course, but not
That's very cool. That's very cool.
With your access to capital up in Canada, it's federally legal. And so, I mean, tell me a little bit about the process for expanding 10 stores. Is that a friends and family round, something that we would traditionally have down here in the US, or are you actually going to banks for a loan, or do you have to go to a company like IIPR and do a sale leaseback option? How does it work?
Yeah, so it really depends on, what vertical you're in. So banks right now, there's only a couple, banks that deal with cannabis companies out here, and then there's some credit unions. But it is pretty challenging to get a bank loan unless you're, a publicly traded company. So that's probably off the table for most private operators. For me personally, for my business, it's more of like a friends and family round. So it was, a small group of shareholders that, all put in money. In terms of the IRPR, like a sale leaseback, those are more suited towards like, large scale like cultivation facilities. Like I haven't seen any sale leasebacks for retail as of yet. It's mostly like manufacturing and cultivation, and most of those companies that end up doing them are also publicly traded companies. And then I guess generally speaking, in regards to access to capital, you see most of the U.S. cannabis companies are listed on the exchange here just because of the rules with banking and all that in the US. But there are companies that are just waiting to uplist and get off the Canadian Securities Exchange and list in the US, just because there's a lot more money, a lot more volume that can be done for their stock if they can list in the US. So I think eventually, when you guys change some of your banking laws, a lot of the companies won't really need to list in Canada. They'll just list over in the US.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So, are you currently looking for investors?
Not currently. Like I think like we should be able to get up to 10 stores with the amount of cash that we have, and then obviously the stores should generate enough free cash flow to then continue expansion. But if we did need any cash, we would most likely just go to our current investor pool, and everyone could put in additional money if they needed to. But yeah, we're not really looking for outside investors right now, just because we have enough cash to get our stores open. We don't really need that at this point in time. But obviously, if the right person came around who had a mix of cash and expertise, then we would entertain it. But I'm not actively out there looking to raise money right now.
It's a nice position to be in. There's a lot of people down here in the US who would love to be in that position.
Yeah, raising money, it's a full-time job, raising money and getting all the legal documents done. So it takes a while, and then it really distracts you from actually running the business. So it's good to get that out of the way and have enough cash to actually execute on the plan.
I hear that from every single person that raises capital. Is it's a full-time job, that's all you do, and it distracts you from everything else. So
yeah, exactly.
Good on you for recognizing that and focusing on what matters, which is generating some revenue and expanding, scaling, all of that good stuff. So over the last hour we've covered a lot. Is there anything that we left out that you'd like to cover right now?
Yeah, I think we covered some good topics. Obviously, there's a lot of differences between, US businesses and Canadian businesses. And hopefully I gave a good overview of, how everything is in Canada and Ontario, and specifically in regards to retail. But, the things change pretty quickly. Obviously, once the lockdowns end, stores are going to open, and, the markets will be, different in terms of, being able to raise money and expand, and, strategies for different operators. So the markets do change very quickly. So we should, regroup in 6 months and see how everything's going.
Yeah, looking forward to catching up and seeing what the Canadian market is doing. Maybe at that point they'll actually be buying some concentrates.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I want to thank my guest, Chris Jones. He's the founder of Cannabis Express up in the Ontario area. Chris, thanks for being on the Talking Hedge.
Great, thanks a lot, Josh.
Yeah, I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.